I took the overnight shift at a diner that never closes. Now I know why it was always hiring. I used to think homelessness happened to other people, the ones you stepped around at gas stations, the ones holding cardboard signs that said, anything helps. But I learned fast how thin the line really is between, I'm doing okay, and I'm sleeping in my car. It started with a dentist bill. Then my transmission went out. Then came the overdraft fees, like little paper bullets hitting me one by one until my bank account bled out. When my rent check bounced, I knew what came next. My landlord, Mr. Fielder, had this nervous laugh he'd do whenever he was about to screw you over. He called me into his office and said he was sorry, but the owner had no choice. The laugh came right before the words, eviction notice. 4 weeks. That's all it took to go from living paycheck to paycheck to sleeping in a rusted Honda Accord outside a 24-hour diner off Highway 41. The funny part, I still had a job. That's what made it all bearable in a strange way. As long as I had work, I could pretend things weren't falling apart. I'd park behind the diner during the day, cover the windows with an old blanket, and nap in the back seat. I'd wake up sore, fix my hair in the rearview mirror, splash my face with bottled water, and go inside like nothing was wrong. The diner was called Highway Haven, a flickering neon sign with a cracked H that buzzed like an insect in the dark. The manager, a man named Chuck, didn't care about resumes or references. If you can show up on time and not steal, he'd said, you can work here. That was good enough for me. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 in the morning, the kind of hours that mess with your head. It's a strange pocket of time when the rest of the world sleeps, and the silence has its own pulse. Most nights were quiet. Drunks on their way home from the bar, truckers who'd seen too much road, and the occasional family travelling through the night because it was cheaper to drive than to stay in a motel. That night was supposed to be one of the quiet ones. The air smelled like burnt coffee and frying oil. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I was leaning against the counter eating chili with too much cheese when Earl, the cook, stepped outside for a smoke. He was in his 50s, slow-moving, with the kind of eyes that had seen enough to stay quiet. The only other person in the diner was Tasha, a young waitress on the late shift with me. She was 7 months pregnant, and the uniform didn't fit her anymore. She had that tired kind of beauty that made people underestimate her. She was sitting on a stool by the pie display, texting someone and biting her lip. Everything okay? I asked. She sighed. My grandma's saying I gotta come pick up my son. She's threatening to call CPS again. Go, I told her. I'll handle it. You sure? Chuck's gonna freak if he finds out I left early. Chuck's not here. Go before she does. Her eyes softened with relief. You're a lifesaver, Lena. Don't mention it. She grabbed her purse and waddled toward the door, calling a quick goodbye to Earl outside before her little sedan sputtered to life and disappeared down the road. And just like that, it was me in the silence. I scrolled job listings on my phone. Security guard, housekeeper, warehouse worker. All either must have own housing or background check required. I sighed and set the phone down, stirring my chili that had gone cold. The wall clock ticked loud enough to fill the room. It was around 2:15 a.m. when I heard the door chime. Ding! I looked up automatically, wiping my hands on my apron, forcing a smile. A family of 4 had walked in. There was something immediately strange about them, though I couldn't say why at first. Maybe it was how clean they looked. Not freshly showered clean, but polished, like they'd stepped out of a movie. The father was tall, with slicked-back dark hair and a checkered shirt tucked into beige slacks. The mother wore a bright red dress, the kind you'd only see in old photos. Neat waist, white collar, perfect curls. The 2 kids, a boy and a girl, had matching outfits, their hair combed like they were posing for a magazine. I noticed, too, that I hadn't heard a car. Usually you'd hear the rumble of an engine, the crunch of tires over gravel. Nothing. They just appeared. Good evening, I said, forcing my voice to sound chipper. Grab any booth you like. They smiled, all at once. The same exact smile. They sat in the booth by the window, hands folded neatly on the table. Earl came back inside right then, halfway through crushing his cigarette under his boot. He froze when he saw them. His face went pale, eyes going wide for just a second before he turned and disappeared into the kitchen without a word. Weird. I grabbed 4 menus and walked over. Evening, folks. Can I get you something to drink? The father looked up, eyes bright and polite. 4 glasses of milk, please. Milk. At 2 a.m., the mother added cheerfully, everything looks so delicious, doesn't it? Though she hadn't opened the menu, I nodded slowly. Sure thing. 4 milks. When I brought them over, they hadn't moved. Not even an inch. Just the same stiff postures, smiles still frozen on their faces. Here you go, I said, setting the glasses down. They didn't reach for them. The condensation began to pool around the bases of the glasses. Are you ready to order, or do you need a few minutes? I asked. The mother turned to me with that same unblinking look. We're waiting for someone, she said softly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Okay, I murmured. Take your time. I turned and walked back to the counter, heart beating a little faster. Through the reflection in the coffee pot, I could see them still sitting perfectly still. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were part of some religious group. Maybe they were actors on their way to some retro photo shoot. Whatever it wasn't my business. Then the boy spoke. His voice was wrong, too deep, too old. We said we're waiting. I flinched so hard the rag slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. When I looked up, all 4 of them were staring right at me. No smiles now, just faces. Expressionless. That's when I saw Earl through the round window in the kitchen door. He was waving frantically, mouthing something I couldn't hear. His eyes were wide, terrified. Excuse me a second, I said quickly, my voice cracking as I backed toward the kitchen. I didn't turn my back on them. Something in me knew not to. The moment the door swung shut behind me, Earl grabbed my arm and yanked me close. Listen to me, he hissed. His voice was shaking. Those people out there aren't people. What the hell are you talking about? Do you see that big bag of salt over there? He pointed toward a heavy sack in the corner, the kind we used in winter for the parking lot. Grab it, now. Earl, what? No time. Just pour a line in front of the door. Don't let it break. From one wall to the other. The look in his eyes made my blood run cold. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't Earl being weird. He was deadly serious. My hands trembled as I tore the bag open and started pouring. That was when the first sound came from the diner. A sharp, guttural crack like someone snapping a tree branch underwater. Then another. And then, from the other side of the door, a voice. Are you ready for us now? It wasn't one voice. It was all four of them at once. Earl grabbed another bag and started pouring a circle around us. Don't cross the line. No matter what happens. Earl, do it! I finished the line, the salt crunching under my shoes. My heart hammered so loud I could barely think. The lights flickered, then went out. The diner plunged into darkness. Only the exit signs glowed red, casting ghostly veins of light along the tile floor. The refrigerator's hum died. The neon buzz outside silenced, leaving only the echo of our breathing. Don't move, Earl whispered. He crouched in the center of the circle he'd poured, eyes fixed on the kitchen door. The bag of salt was still half open beside him, crystals spilling out like bone dust. From the dining area came a low scraping sound, like chairs being dragged across the floor. Slowly, one after another. My skin crawled. They're just people, I whispered, trying to convince myself. They're just... The noise stopped. Then came a voice. We're waiting for someone, the mother said again. But her tone was different now. Flat, empty, like a recording that had played too many times. I stared at the small circular window on the swinging kitchen door. The glass was fogged from the inside, but I could see vague shapes moving in the red glow beyond it. One tall, two small. 4 silhouettes standing perfectly still. Earl didn't blink. If they come in, he whispered, don't look, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't cross that line. A silence followed, so deep I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then, from somewhere in the dark, the door chime rang again. Ding! It shouldn't have been possible. The door had never opened. I felt something in the air shift. A pressure, like a storm rolling in. My stomach twisted. Earl's hand shot out and gripped my wrist so hard it hurt. Stay inside the circle. The metal hinges on the swinging door began to creak. The window's glass flexed inward, as if something was pressing its face against it from the other side. Then, in a single violent burst, the door flew open. Cold air flooded in, carrying with it the smell of old earth and something else. Wet. Metallic and faintly sweet like rusted sugar. At first, I thought the lights were still off, but no, the dark was moving. It wasn't absence of light, it was something else. The shapes slid through the doorway, a churning liquid blackness that clung to the air like smoke under water. Within it, pale glimpses appeared. Teeth, eyes, and hands that didn't connect to bodies. I couldn't scream. My voice was locked in my throat. The sound that followed didn't belong in this world. A chorus of overlapping shrieks, high and sharp, like metal tearing in half. The salt on the floor vibrated. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but the noise wasn't just in the air. It was inside me, vibrating in my ribs, my skull, my teeth. Beside me, Earl stayed frozen in the circle, whispering something under his breath. His hands trembled but never crossed the salt line. The black mass reached the line and stopped. The edges quivered, brushing the salt but not crossing it. Each grain that touched the substance hissed, sparking faint blue light. I stared, shaking, as faint outlines began to take shape in the mass. Human forms, like memories surfacing in dirty water. The father's smile appeared first, then the mother's red dress, shimmering faintly like a ghost. The 2 children's heads tilted in unison, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the exit sign. They looked exactly as before. Perfect, clean, wrong. The father leaned forward, his voice no longer folksy. We've been waiting. Earl's breathing grew shallow. Close your eyes, he whispered. I obeyed. But the moment I shut them, I saw them clearer. Faces forming behind my eyelids, smiles stretching too wide, voices murmuring over each other, words I couldn't understand. Something warm ran down my upper lip. I wiped it away and saw my fingers streaked with blood. Nosebleed. Earl, I gasped. Don't move! I felt heat rising around us, the air thickening like tar. The noise grew louder, not screaming anymore, but whispering, hundreds of voices speaking in unison. The smell of rotten sugar filled my mouth, heavy and sweet. I couldn't take it. My mind started to break. I opened my eyes. They were right there, inches away. The family stood on the other side of the salt, smiling again, eyes wide and wet. Their skin was grey now, as if it had been painted over with ash. The little girl's pigtails dripped like ink. The mother bent her head sideways, the motion too smooth, too fluid. You shouldn't be here, she said in a sing-song voice. Her smile never moved. Earl grabbed my arm and pulled me closer to him. Don't listen, he hissed. They lie. Who are they? I whispered. He didn't answer. The boy stepped forward, stopping just short of the salt line. He reached out a hand, small, perfect, pale, and hovered it inches above the crystals. The hiss that rose from the floor sounded almost alive, like the salt itself was warning him away. The boy smiled wider. You look tired. I froze. Maybe you should rest, the mother said. Come sit with us, the father added, voice echoing inside my skull like it came from behind me instead of in front. Earl snapped, "Don't talk to them!" He grabbed a handful of salt and threw it at the shapes. The crystals hit their skin and burst into sparks. The family shrieked again, a single piercing note that felt like it could split the world open. The mass recoiled, slithering back toward the dining room. The shadows twisted and folded into themselves, dragging the air with them like a vacuum. Then it was over. Silence. No sound, no movement, no light, except the faint red glow of the exit sign reflecting off the salt on the floor. I realized I was crying. My face was wet, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Earl didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, he stood, his joints cracking. "Stay here," he murmured. "Where are you going?" He looked at the door. "To see if they're gone." "No." But before I could stop him, he stepped toward the edge of the circle, grabbed the flashlight from the counter, and carefully shined it through the round window in the swinging door. Nothing. Just empty booths, untouched milk glasses still sweating on the table. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. "They're gone." "Gone where?" He didn't answer. When he finally turned the lights back on, the diner looked exactly as it had before. Chairs in place, counters clean, even the menus neatly stacked. But something was different. The air felt wrong, heavy, stale, like the room was holding its breath. I wanted to go outside, to breathe something real, but Earl wouldn't let me. "Not yet," he said. We waited. Another hour passed, then another. No sound except the clock ticking above the register. Finally, when the first pale streaks of dawn slipped through the blinds, Earl nodded toward the door. "You can step out now." I pushed it open slowly, blinking at the weak morning light. The parking lot was empty, the asphalt wet from dew. No footprints, no tire marks, just silence. We didn't talk much after that. Earl swept up the salt, the part that hadn't fused to the tile, and dumped it into a metal bucket that smelled like gasoline. When I asked why, he just said, "It's used up." By 6:30, the first morning customers trickled in. 2 truckers and a nurse in scrubs. They didn't notice anything strange. The place looked normal, but I couldn't shake it. The milk glasses, the perfect smiles, the voices that didn't belong to mouths. As I took orders, I caught my reflection in the window. My face was pale, eyes rimmed red, and behind me, in the glass, just for a second, I thought I saw a figure standing by the booth where the family had sat. The mother, still smiling, but when I turned, the booth was empty. That morning, after my shift, I sat in my car and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep, stress, hunger, it all adds up. Maybe the power surge had triggered some weird hallucination. But as I started the car, I saw something on my windshield. 4 small, wet handprints. Too big, too small. I didn't sleep that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. The father's frozen smile, the mother's tilted head, the children's lifeless faces. The sound of their voices still echoed in my skull like static caught between radio stations. I sat in my car for hours, parked behind the diner, watching the morning traffic crawl by on Highway 41. Trucks groaned past, their trailers rattling in the heat. Life went on like nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. The 4 handprints on my windshield had dried into pale outlines, like salt stains after ocean water evaporates. I wiped them with my sleeve. They didn't come off. At noon, I finally went inside the gas station across the road for coffee. The cashier, a grey-haired woman named Doris who'd worked there forever, looked me up and down. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that." She poured me a cup and leaned in a little. "You work over at the Haven, don't you?" "Yeah." Her eyes flicked toward the diner's glowing sign. "You ever see anything strange out there?" The way she said it made me pause. "Strange how?" Doris hesitated, then said, "Forget it. You don't want to know." When I pressed, she only muttered something about old stories and things that don't stay buried. That was enough to ruin my appetite. By the time my next shift started, the air had changed. The kind of thick electric air that comes before a storm. The neon "open 24 hours" sign flickered, and for the first time, I wished it didn't. Earl was already in the kitchen when I walked in, chopping onions with methodical precision. His movements were slower than usual, though, his eyes distant. "You good?" I asked. He grunted. "As good as anyone working here." "About the other night." I started. "Don't," he said. "You're better off not thinking about it." "Earl." He looked up then, knife still in hand. "You ever hear of something called a place memory?" I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Places remember. Same way people do. Something bad happens, really bad, and it leaves a mark. That mark doesn't go away, it just repeats." He wiped the blade on a towel. "That's what this diner is. A loop in the road where something went wrong and decided to stay." "So what were they?" "That family?" He shook his head. "Not ghosts. Not exactly. More like echoes of something that never ended." Before I could ask more, the door chime rang. Ding. We both froze. It was only 10:07 p.m. I turned slowly, my breath catching, but it wasn't them. A man in a wrinkled suit walked in, rubbing his hands together against the chill. His face looked weathered, exhausted. "Coffee," he said. "And whatever's hot." I poured him a cup with shaking hands. The relief was sharp but short-lived. The bell sound had been the same, and I couldn't forget the way it echoed, like something pretending to be normal. The night dragged on in slow motion. Around midnight, the rain started. Heavy sheets that blurred the world outside. The sound against the windows was relentless. Earl said the weather might help, that they didn't like rain. I didn't ask who they were. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside to dump the trash. The storm had calmed to a drizzle, fog rolling off the asphalt. The air was cool and heavy. My car sat where I'd left it, beads of water tracing lines across the windshield. When I got closer, I stopped dead. The handprints were back, 4 of them, fresh this time, as if someone, or something, had pressed their palms there moments before. My stomach knotted. I spun around, scanning the empty lot. Nothing but the distant glow of the highway lights and the faint hum of insects. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. I dropped the trash, hurried back inside, and slammed the door behind me. Earl looked up from the counter. "You all right?" "Handprints, again." His expression hardened. "You sure?" "Positive." He walked to the window and peered through the glass. Then he locked the door. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Earl, what the hell is going on?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of yellow paper from his pocket. "It looked old, creased a dozen times. Found this under the grill when I started here." He laid it flat on the counter. It was a handwritten list in faded ink. Rules for the overnight shift. Never serve milk after 1 a.m. If a family of 4 arrives, do not seat them. Keep salt lines intact at all exits. Do not look directly at reflections after 3 or 1 a.m. Never, under any circumstance, go outside between 2 and 4 a.m. The list ended with a single note, scribbled in darker ink. "If you break any of these, they'll remember your face." My hands went cold. "What is this?" I whispered. "Left by the last cook before me," Earl said. "Name was Calvin. He quit after 1 night." "Why didn't you show me this sooner?" He sighed. "Because if you believed it, you'd run. And if you didn't, you'd die." Before I could reply, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady. Earl's gaze went to the window. The rain had stopped. Outside, the fog was thick as milk. The door chime rang. Ding. I froze. "Earl," he didn't answer. We turned toward the door together. The diner was empty. Then the chime rang again. Ding. No one was there. The third time it rang, the air turned cold. Frost crawled across the inside of the glass door, like veins spreading under skin. A voice whispered through the static of the old jukebox. "We've been waiting." The power cut out. The room plunged into dark silence. The only sound was my pulse thudding in my ears. Earl grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and pointed it toward the front. At first, there was nothing, just the reflection of the beam bouncing off chrome and tile. Then movement, slow, subtle, a shadow gliding across the floor, dragging itself closer. "They're back," he muttered. The flashlight trembled in his hand. The figures materialized at the edge of the light. Faint outlines of people, wet and grey, eyes shining too bright. The father, the mother, the children, the same family. The mother's red dress looked darker now, soaked in something that wasn't water. Her voice floated through the dark, calm and sweet. "We found you!" Earl stepped back, fumbling for the salt bag. "Line," he hissed. "Now." We tore open the bag, pouring salt across the tile in shaking lines, sealing ourselves in a rough circle by the counter. The family moved closer. Their footsteps made no sound. The father tilted his head. "You can't keep us out forever." "Watch me," Earl muttered. Then, for the first time, the little girl spoke. Her voice was soft, innocent, almost human. "You were supposed to help us." Something deep inside me cracked at the sound. She sounded hurt, not angry, not monstrous, just lost. "What do you mean?" I whispered before I could stop myself. Earl turned sharply. "Don't talk to it!" But it was too late. The girl's eyes flicked to me, and the edges of her mouth lifted in a trembling smile. "You remember us now, don't you?" she said. "You saw us before." I shook my head. "No," her smile widened, revealing too many teeth. "You did." The lights flickered again. The father stepped forward, right to the edge of the salt line, his shoe pressed against it, the crystals sizzling like acid. Smoke rose, filling the air with the stench of burning metal. Earl grabbed my shoulder. "Close your eyes." I couldn't. The boy reached out his hand, pale and dripping, and brushed the invisible barrier. The salt hissed louder, glowing faint blue. The floor shook under my feet. "Stop," I whispered. "Please stop." The mother's voice turned sharp. "We can't. You opened the door." "What door?" She smiled. "The one that remembers you." Then all at once, the salt line burst apart, blown into a swirling cloud by a gust of cold wind that came from nowhere. The light went out, and something touched my arm. Cold, wet, human. I screamed. When I came to, the diner was filled with smoke and the smell of burnt plastic. The emergency lights glowed red. Earl was kneeling beside me, shaking my shoulder. "Lena, Lena, wake up." My throat burned. What happened?" "They almost got through." "You fainted." I sat up, dizzy. The floor around us was blackened where the salt had been. The air shimmered with faint blue haze. "They're gone?" I croaked. "For now," he said. But the look on his face told me it wasn't over. As dawn broke, the diner was silent again. The glass door stood open, fog spilling in from outside. On the counter, the list of rules lay flat and wet, the ink bleeding into unreadable shapes. Only one line was still legible. "They'll remember your face." When the sun came up, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like an accident of time, like the night had only paused to catch its breath. The diner windows were fogged from the inside, the air heavy with the smell of burnt wiring and old grease. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, fighting to stay alive. I sat at the counter, wrapped in a grey blanket Earl had pulled from the storage room. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I blinked, I saw their faces again. Those smiles carved into something that looked like flesh but wasn't. Earl stood by the window, smoking in silence, watching the highway disappear into the rising mist. He hadn't said a word in over an hour. The ash from his cigarette fell into a coffee mug already half full. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, bruised and swollen. "You should go home," he said finally, voice raw. Get some rest, I laughed, the sound brittle and hollow. Home, I said. That's funny. He looked at me then, really looked like he'd forgotten I was still there. Right, he muttered. The car. His eyes softened for the first time since last night. You can sleep in the storeroom if you want. Lock the door from the inside. I hesitated. And what about you? He shrugged. I don't sleep much. He started cleaning again, wiping the counter, stacking plates that were already clean. His movements were automatic, like someone trying to pretend the world hadn't tilted off its axis. I didn't move. The coffee in front of me had gone cold hours ago. The clock ticked loud enough to fill the silence. 8:12 a.m., just another day. When I finally spoke, my voice was a whisper. What happens now? Earl exhaled smoke through his nose. Now, we wait. For what? For them to forget. He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. And if they don't? He didn't answer, just stared out at the empty highway. The silence stretched so long, I thought that was the end of it, until he said, This place wasn't always a diner. I turned toward him slowly. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, far away. Back in the 50s, this was a rest stop. One of the first built off 41. Gas pumps, little cabins, a place for families to stretch their legs before heading to the coast. The story goes, one summer night, a family checked in and never checked out. He flicked his cigarette into the sink. They found the car still parked outside, engine cold, the lights in the cabins on. But no sign of them. Not then, not ever. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. And you think that's them? The ones we saw? I don't think, he said. I know. Been here long enough to learn the difference between thinking and knowing. How long? 13 years. Jesus, Earl. Yeah, don't say that name too loud. Doesn't help in here. I watched him light another cigarette with trembling hands. You ever try to leave? He smiled faintly, but it wasn't humor. Every time I do, something drags me back. Flat tire, bad luck, dead engine. Once I got all the way to Missouri before I woke up parked outside the diner again. I stopped fighting it. His words sat heavy between us. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, humming like an insect. I rubbed my arms to shake the cold, but it wasn't just the air. It was deeper, a chill that came from knowing something inside this building was older than either of us. Why the salt? I asked quietly. Old protection. Doesn't stop them forever, just keeps them from getting too close. The woman who trained me said it's the only thing they hate more than light. And the light keeps travelers from pulling in. When they're around, the place draws people in like a magnet. Turn off the lights, they pass right by. You're saying they lure people? Not on purpose, not anymore. It's more like hunger that never ends. His eyes met mine, grey and tired. You saw it, you felt it. They don't want to hurt. They want to fill something that's been empty too long. I swallowed hard. Then why us? Because we're here. The air conditioner kicked on suddenly, making me jump. Earl didn't react. He just leaned his elbows on the counter and stared into his coffee, like he was seeing something in the reflection I couldn't. You said they might forget, I said. What if they don't? He smiled faintly. Then you start seeing them in other places. Windows, mirrors, shadows that don't match what's casting them. His tone was calm, almost gentle. They like to be remembered. The silence after that was unbearable. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing air, and stepped outside. The morning was grey and still, the sky the colour of wet cement. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, empty except for a single car crawling in the distance. I breathed deep, but the air felt thin, hollow. My car sat in the same spot behind the diner. For a second, I considered getting in and driving. Anywhere, just away. But when I reached the driver's side, I stopped cold. There was something tucked under the windshield wiper, a folded napkin. My stomach twisted as I pulled it free. It was the diner's napkin, white with faded red lettering. Highway Haven, always open. Someone had written a message on it in smeared black ink. You left the light on. I froze, staring at the words until they blurred. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I looked around the lot. Empty. Not even birds. I turned slowly toward the diner. Earl was at the window, looking out, but his eyes weren't on me. They were on the booth, the same one where the family had sat. I followed his gaze. There was someone sitting there. A woman, facing away, hair dark and curled just like the mother's. Her red dress glowed faintly against the sunlight, colour too bright for this world. I blinked. She was gone. The booth empty. Earl stepped out a moment later, wiping his hands on a towel. You look like you saw a ghost. I laughed weakly. Maybe I did. Then you're seeing too much. He squinted at the napkin in my hand. Where'd you get that? It was on my car. His jaw tightened. They know your name now. The words hit like ice. What? Doesn't matter how. You spoke to them. That's how it starts. They follow the sound. The sound? Your voice. They find the frequency. I wanted to laugh, to tell him he sounded insane. But the way his face looked stopped me. He wasn't lying. He was scared, more than before. What do I do? I whispered. You stay here until I figure it out. Here? I gestured toward the diner. After what just happened, it's the only place with rules. He glanced toward the fog beyond the lot. Out there are no rules. He went back inside without another word, leaving me alone in the growing light. I didn't follow. I just stood there, staring at the stretch of highway where the fog began to thin. For a second, I thought I saw shapes moving in it. Small, slow, and deliberate. Like people walking hand in hand. Then the wind picked up and they vanished. The silence pressed in. The napkin crumpled in my shaking fist. You left the light on. I didn't leave the diner that night. I told myself it was because I had nowhere to go. But deep down, I knew it was something else. A pull, like gravity, slow but unstoppable. The diner lights flickered against the fog as the highway hummed in the distance. A low, endless heartbeat. Earl had disappeared into the back room hours earlier. rummaging through boxes, muttering to himself. I sat alone at the counter, staring at the napkin with those words burned into my mind. You left the light on. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the fridge, the rattle of the vents, the faint creak of the roof settling. By midnight, the silence was unbearable. I stood, stretched my legs, and glanced toward the parking lot through the window. My breath caught. The handprints were back on the glass. Not on the outside this time, but inside. Faint and wet. Too big, too small. I stumbled back, my chair scraping loud against the tile. "Earl!" I shouted. No answer. I grabbed the flashlight and moved toward the kitchen. The swinging door creaked as I pushed through. The air smelled faintly of metal and smoke. The light beam cut across the room, shaking with my hands. "Earl!" Nothing. Only the faint drip of a leaking faucet. I stepped farther in, the floor sticky under my shoes. At the far end of the room, the walk-in freezer door stood open, frost curling out like smoke. I swallowed hard and pointed the light inside. Empty. My breath fogged in the cold air. I turned back toward the door and froze. There were footprints on the floor. Small ones, bare feet, leading from the freezer to the dining area. I followed them, one step at a time, the flashlight trembling. They stopped at the salt line, or what was left of it. Someone had disturbed it. The crystals were scattered, swept aside like sand. The sound of the door chime broke the silence. Ding. My body went cold. Slowly, I turned toward the entrance. They were there, the family, the same perfect smiles, the same stillness. Only this time they didn't look quite as clean. Their clothes were damp, wrinkled, streaked with dark stains that might have been water or blood. The father's voice came first, smooth and calm. "You shouldn't have stayed." I stepped back, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Earl," I called again, but it came out as a whisper. The mother tilted her head. "He's gone. What do you want from me?" "You saw us," the boy said softly. "You remembered." The little girl smiled, her pigtails glistening with moisture. "We only want to eat." "Eat," my voice cracked. "Eat what?" "Warmth," the mother said. "Memory, breath." She took a step forward and I flinched. "Stay back." "You left the light on," the father said. "That means you invited us in." I shook my head violently. "No, I didn't. I didn't mean to." "Meaning doesn't matter." His smile widened, splitting just a little too far. "Rules are rules." The lights above us began to buzz and flicker, the air thick with static. My flashlight sputtered and died. Panic surged through me. I stumbled backward, reaching for the bag of salt near the counter. My fingers closed around it just as the mother moved closer. I tore it open and poured a line with shaking hands. The salt hissed where it hit the floor, glowing faintly blue. The family stopped. The little girl's expression twisted, her voice suddenly sharp. "That won't save you. It's too late." The sound of a door opening made me jump. Earl emerged from the back, his face pale, eyes bloodshot. He was carrying something heavy, a rusted metal lantern. He dropped it on the counter and lit the wick. A dull orange flame flickered to life. The family flinched. "Back," he said, voice low and firm. "Back to where you came from." The father sneered. "You can't hold us forever, Earl." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can make you remember what you did." He turned to me. "Lena, get behind the counter. What is that?" "Something older than salt." I ducked behind the counter as he raised the lantern. The flame pulsed, brighter now, almost alive. The family hissed in unison, their faces rippling like reflections in water. "You kept the road open," Earl said through clenched teeth. "You brought them here." "We were hungry," the mother replied, her voice breaking apart into static. "You built this place on our graves." "You shouldn't have been on that road," he snapped. "It wasn't the road that killed us," she said softly. "It was him." The flame in the lantern flickered, dimming for a moment. Earl's face twisted in pain. "Lies," he muttered. "You liar." "Tell her," the father said, stepping forward. "Tell her what you did." "Earl?" I whispered, heart hammering. He didn't look at me. "Don't listen," but I was already listening. The family spoke as one, their voices overlapping into a single, terrible harmony. "He built the haven. He made it bright so travelers would stop. He fed us. He kept us here." My stomach dropped. "Earl?" He shook his head violently. "No, I didn't. You brought them," the little girl said. "Truckers, runaways, people no one would miss. You said you were saving them from the road, but you were feeding us." I stared at him. "Earl, what are they talking about?" His eyes glistened in the light. "You don't understand. I was trying to protect people, keep the family from spreading. By killing them," I said, voice trembling. He didn't answer. The lantern light flared again, blinding for a second. When it dimmed, the family was gone. Only the smell of damp earth remained. Earl sank to his knees, trembling, clutching the lantern like it was his heart. "It worked," he whispered. "They're gone." But I knew it wasn't true. Not this time. The silence felt wrong again. Thicker, heavier. I turned toward the windows. In the reflection, the booths were full. The family was sitting there, perfectly still, smiling. Earl saw it too. His eyes widened. "They're inside the reflection," he murmured. "They've changed the rule." The glass cracked. A spider web of fractures racing across the windows. One by one, the reflections turned their heads toward me. I stumbled backward. "Earl, what do we do?" "Run," he said. But it was too late. The glass exploded inward, shards raining like rain. The lights went out. Cold air swallowed the room. I felt hands grab me, small, icy hands, and yank me down. I screamed, kicking, thrashing, clawing at the darkness. Earl shouted something I couldn't hear. Then the world went black. I woke to the sound of rain, soft, steady. My cheek pressed against cool tile. The diner was quiet again. No broken glass, no blood, no family. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft flicker of light from the lantern on the counter. Earl was gone. Only his jacket hung on a hook by the door. I tried to stand, but my body ached. My reflection caught my eye in the glass panel of the coffee machine. I froze. Behind me, in the reflection, the booths were full again. The family sat smiling. This time I didn't turn around. I just stared. Their eyes met mine in the glass, calm and patient. The The little girl lifted her hand and pressed it to the reflection. Slowly, without thinking, I lifted mine. The glass felt warm. For the first time, I heard my own voice speaking, but it didn't feel like mine. "Welcome to Highway Haven," I said softly. "Open all night." The reflection smiled wider, and this time I smiled back.